Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be detailing the best way to farm fragments now that the loot booster has been removed from the special shop. So previously the best way to farm fragments in King's Raid was to go to the special shop and purchase a loot booster. So a loot booster is, you can still obtain one a month from the Tower of Challenge, and all it does is item drop rate is boosted by 100% for 1 hour. It does not work in the case of Stockade, Tower of Ordeals, and the first clear rewards for Tower of Challenge, but it does work in Tower of Challenge for artifact pieces, and it works in normal story mode for gear as well as fragment drops, and most importantly, in the upper dungeon. The old method was you would wait till 11:30 server time, go to the highest upper dungeon you could do, and run the upper dungeon, refresh with 100 rubies, run it again, refresh with 200 rubies, run it again. The server would tick over, and you'd repeat the same process until your loot booster ran out. However, with the removal of that item and the changed upper dungeons, where we can now run each upper dungeon 5 times a day instead of only being able to run 5 of any upper dungeon a day, there is a new best method. So the best method now is simply to run the lowest stages you can all the way up to the highest stage you can. For the lowest stages, you don't do anything, you just run them as normal and take the fragments you need. Once you get to the highest stage you can run, preferably Chapter 7. You don't really need to do this before Chapter 7. If you're desperate for fragments early game, I would start doing this around Chapter 5, although I'd only refresh once, and honestly I probably wouldn't even refresh, I would just use the new loot boosting method. But the method now is on the highest stage you can run, preferably Chapter 7. You simply go to it, you tick acquired loot times 2, and then you auto-repeat it. And this will cost 100 rubies. Then, if you really need the fragments, you do this again. You pay another 100 rubies, and you tick the loot boosting box again. It's important to note the reason we can do this is because it costs the exact same amount of rubies to both acquire the extra loot times 2, so loot boost it, as it does to refresh it. Because it costs 100 rubies to refresh it to give us 5 new keys, those 5 new keys will give us 75 new fragments if we don't loot boost. If we instead do the simply loot boost once and don't get any new keys, the 100 rubies will get us 75 fragments, as they will double the 75 fragments we got originally. Through this method, you'll get, at Chapter 7, you'll get an extra 150 fragments a day. You'll get 75, or actually I think it's actually 225 if you do the double boost. It's 75 if you only acquire loot times 2, which I would always do over simply refreshing it, just because it'll take less time. And if you don't need anything at all, you can just save your rubies. Sorry about that. So personally what I do is every day I at the very least do the acquire loot times 2 in Chapter 7 Upper Dungeon, just because that allows me to get 75 extra fragments a day, which makes up, I want to say, about a quarter of the total fragments you'll get in a day, because you get 40 plus 30, so 70, 105, 145, 195, you get like 260 something fragments a day, I want to say, maybe a bit more, if I'm doing the math right. And then getting these extra 75 will put you up to somewhere in the low to mid 300s, which means you're getting an extra 25 to 30% of fragments a day, which is pretty nice to get. Now, obviously, loot boosting for fragments is a good idea. It is probably the best use of your rubies in the game in terms of pure progression, but I would not go past using 200 rubies to reset, just because that is pretty much the limit you want to do. And honestly, what you can do is once a month you can still use the old loot boosting method. So go to the inventory. As long as you can clear TOC, I want to say it's 40, you will get a loot booster scroll, a single loot booster. And you can use this at any time really, but I would use it at 11:30 to 12:30 server time, because you get the free resets, and then just go as hardcore as you can, clearing as fast as you can. I do it at the end of the month too, or even save it until you really need the fragments to get a unit to a certain transcendence level before a deadline. Say, for example, if you really need to hit Masters and you've got one more unit to upgrade to really allow your PvP team to shine, or if you need to clear TOC 61 and you need to transcend T3 Artemia, for example, then that is when I would use the loot booster to try and do it, just because you want to use the loot booster when you have the strongest team available to you so you can clear it as fast as possible. The problem a lot of players run into when they're trying to loot boost with a 1 hour loot booster is that if you're doing it and you've got a slightly weaker team, Chapter 7 Upper Dungeon can take upwards of 10 to 15 minutes to run all 5 runs, which means you'll only get 2 full keys, sets of keys done, which is only 1 set of 100 ruby recharges, which means you're actually not using the loot booster very efficiently, and it's a little bit of a waste of resources. So try and get the clear time down to about a minute and a half for the Chapter 7 Upper Dungeon before you use any loot boosters on it to try and do it. I would not use the loot booster scroll on anything before the Chapter 7 Upper Dungeon, just because it's not really worth it to use on Chapter 6 or below, as the Chapter 7 Upper Dungeon gives 15 fragments per run, as opposed to the 10 for Chapter 6, 8, 7, 6, 5 for Chapters 5 through 2, and 3 fragments per run for Chapter 1. So you can really see that Chapter 7 is by far the best one to run, and if you can run it in a decent time, the old loot boosting method is still pretty good, even if you can only do it once a month. But yeah, so the new loot boosting method is just you go in, you acquire loot times 2, you do it 5 times with all 5 keys, and then you pay 100 rubies to refresh that, and you acquire loot times 2 again, and you run it again. If you really want to, you can do it one more time, pay one more set of 200 rubies, make sure to loot boost again, and that will be the most you can really get in a day with optimal ruby resetting. I believe if you want, you could then actually go and perform the first set of Chapter 6, where you loot boost, refresh, loot boost again. But personally, rubies are still somewhat scarce resource if you're like me and only use the daily ruby packs. So I would kind of save the rubies unless you've got a huge stockpile saved up and really need to make your team a lot stronger, a lot faster. Now the reason I do it every day, so I'll kind of conclude the video with this, the reason I do it every day is because you kind of want to have Fragments of Infinity cooking at all times. So I just finished a set right before this video started, and that is because you want to be making as many Stones of Infinity as possible. Stones of Infinity are what allow you to transcend your units, and having more of them is never a bad thing. If you get a new unit, for example, I've got Priscilla in the inn, and it turns out that they're super meta for something but need a certain transcendence level, or you have theory crafted a team but it requires that unit and requires them to have a certain amount of strength. For example, my Ezekiel over here, I am raising, and I really need to get him to at the very least T4 so that I can make the tank build that I'm kind of going with for him work better. Obviously, I'm not going to be using 0 and 1 star gear. I'll have it all 5 star by the time that I do it, but I want to get him to at least T4 for the 2 best tank perks, and ideally T5, as this kind of allows Ezekiel to ignore a few offensive stats and still do respectable damage. Anyways guys, that's how you loot boost with the brand new loot boosting system. I hope this video was helpful. Subscribe if you liked it, and have a good one.